really, again, he comes to the thesis points here in this next few verses.
Killer. Let's see, verse 18, chapter 3, Galatians. For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise. Again, we see the stone upon stone aspect of like Greek Hellenistic thought here. Jews tended to think of things holistically, whereas the Greek/Hellenistic idea was to build one premise upon another, and we see Paul being very sort of, if you will, Greek in his thinking here, making these points, which is interesting because he's being very Greek in the logic trained, but also very Jewish in the Old Testament references. Paul is building on his last point, obviously, in verse 17, and telling us that the law does not affect the promise God made to Abraham, and that if it did, it would obviously not be a promise. It would be something else. Now, just by way of sort of sorting out some things here, there are two ways to look at the various covenants God makes with his people. You've got the conditional, meaning qualified by reservations. The dictionary defines it, imposing or depending on or containing a condition, conditional acceptance of terms, i.e. lent conditional support. The conditional sale will not be complete until the full purchase price is paid. Conditional, with strings attached, you might say. If you do this, I'll do this. Those would be things like the law. If you do this, I will do this. Exodus has several examples of conditional promises. Here's one, probably my favorite one. Exodus 23, verse 20. Behold, I sent an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies and an adversary unto thine adversaries. So, if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies. Now that's a conditional promise. An unconditional promise is defined as it's not conditioned. There's no strings attached. Again, we saw an unconditional promise last week in the Galatians chapter 3 when I referenced 2 Samuel chapter 7, which we'll look at here again. Verse 12, 2 Samuel chapter 7. When your days are fulfilled, he's speaking to David, God is speaking to David, when your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. Paul's point here, and really over the last few verses, is that Abraham's promise was unconditional to those who inherited it. The promise did not, the law did not disannul the promise, for God gave it to Abraham by promise. That's all I have. Chris?
Cool, that's good. For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of a promise, but God gave it to Abraham by a promise. So he's saying all that stuff. If we do this by the law, it's not even a promise. You know, it's something other than that. It's really a terrific argument if you think about what Paul is doing here. He's saying that since God gave us an unbreakable promise about this inheritance, it logically follows then that the law is not a promise, because the law is not only breakable, but it has never been kept once apart from Jesus. So he's saying if our inheritance comes by the law, then God's promise is dependent on our ability to keep the law. So that's not a promise, because we obviously don't. And therefore God's promise would be disannulled, because it would have to be disannulled. There would be no other option, because if it was based on the law. So that, of course, has never happened. God's promise has never been disannulled. So he's just making this, I mean, this to me would be like a really good argument. If he was saying this, it's a good thing he's probably writing this down so they could like read each line over and over.
Yeah, because it wouldn't make sense hearing it.
Yeah, it'd be like
too hard, too much stuff.
Yeah, that's all I have for that one.
Okay. Let's see. Galatians chapter 3, verse 19. Wherefore then serveth the law? It was added because of transgressions, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made, and it was ordained by angels in the hand of a mediator. This is by far one of the most interesting verses in our study to date. And you could call this verse, and what I'm going to say, why bother looking at the Septuagint? ? And let me answer that question. So let's back up here and look at Deuteronomy 32, verse 1 and 2. Now, here's the Masoretic text. This is a literal rendering of the traditional Hebrew text of the Old Testament, what you would standardly get in a King James Bible. This is the blessing with which Moses, the man of God, blessed the Israelites before his death. He said, Yahweh came from Sinai, and he shone upon them from Seir. He appeared in radiance from Mount Paran, and approached from Riboth Kadesh. From his right lightning flashed at them. Indeed, he loved the people, all his holy ones at your hand, and they followed at your feet. He bears your words. The law which Moses commanded us, an inheritance for the assembly of Jacob. Now here's the Septuagint rendering. This is the blessing with Moses, the man of God, blessed the Israelites before his death. He said, the Lord came from Sinai, and he shone to us from Seir. He made haste from Mount Paran with 10,000s of Kadesh, his angels with him. And he, verse 3 of the Septuagint, and he had pity on his people, and all the holy ones were under your hands, and they were under you. And he received his words, the law which Moses charged us, an inheritance to the assemblies of Jacob. So what exactly are we looking at here?
Maybe
Go ahead.
a suggestion to tell people what the Septuagint is.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry, folks. I'm sorry. There are three lines of evidence that people who follow the text of the Bible closely derive the text from. One is the Masoretic text. The Masoretic text is a suite of texts, if you will, where these professional families called the Masorite families, they were professional scribes. That's all they did was transcribe the Bible all day, write it down over and over again. The Masorites had this specific texts with vowel markings, and we sort of received that as our standard Old Testament, the Masoretic text, in about 900 A.D., and that was really where it was codified. Like, this is the Masoretic text. This is our Old Testament. Now, the Septuagint is a Greek translation into Greek that dates to 250 B.C. Now, for various reasons, there are fairly good reasons to sort of prefer the Masorite text. However, it is not altogether clear that the Masorite text is entirely it's not entirely perfect.
And make another quick distinction that these aren't really big differences. They're for
very, very small.
The geeky types like us. But also, it's notable that the Septuagint is really great to find out which words rendered from the Hebrew have their Greek equivalents. So for people that are really into the language of trying to figure out what the exact word translates to in the Greek, it's great for that too. But go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, what we see in the Masoretic text is, I'll read it. Approach from Riboleth Kadesh, from his right lightning flashed at them. Indeed, he loved the people, all his holy ones at your hand. In the Septuagint, we see that same verse. He made haste from Mount Paran with 10,000s of Kadesh, his angels with him, and he had pity on his people, and all the holy ones were under your hands, and they were under you.